I used this process to become the number one salesperson in the company by a great deal. I was running over $300,000 per month in revenue in the first 2 months I was there. It was absurd. I want to share with you guys the greatest sales lesson I ever learned. And if you can grok what I'm about to share and embody it and practice it, you will be able to sell or move the needle in virtually any area of your life. Now, I learned this lesson not from a teacher, although I had heard it before. I learned it from real life experience. And actually, I learned it during what I would consider to be the lowest moment of my life. Because at one point, after having somewhat of a successful career in sales, I spent 4 years working at a big internet company in New York during the first big internet bubble. After that experience, I had taken a different path and had found what I thought was my passion in life and ended up investing a lot of time and money into a particular project that didn't really work out. And it was a big learning experience for me because when that entire thing fizzled, I was left with some gaping holes in my life. Number one, I had run out of money. And the story of success that I had built for myself had vanished. And number two, I was lacking direction and purpose. And it got so bad for me that I ended up having to file bankruptcy. At 27 years old, after having a really good start to my career and the world was my oyster, I could have done anything. I had invested time and money and energy into this project and I felt invincible. And it was a huge wake-up call when I learned that the entire thing was nothing. And I was sitting in my apartment with a mound of debt, credit cards, not knowing what I wanted to do with my time, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, feeling embarrassed, feeling devastated in almost every single level of my soul. And so I was going through this bankruptcy proceeding and I didn't even know what to do for money or for a job. So one night, late night, and I'm searching there on Craigslist and I stumbled upon this telemarketing job that happened to be very close to my apartment. And I decided to send an email for this pretty lame telemarketing job. And I got a response right away, which isn't a great sign to get a response at midnight on a Tuesday. But I got a response and I started talking to this manager. And basically, they had a telemarketing gig that was helping people get out of debt. They had a debt consolidation service, pretty common. And he told me that the job was I come in there, I get on the phone, I put on some earphones and I'm on a dialer, right? And they give me a script and the phone is just ringing, trying to reach people who have massive amounts of debt. And my goal for this job, if I wanted it, was to encourage people that we had a solution for consolidating this debt. And I would need their social security number. That's what the goal of these phone calls were, in order to run their credit and then call them back with our company's debt solution. This was the job that I was now being forced to do. Just felt really low, okay? And I want to share with you what happened here, because in the span of 5 weeks, I went from being virtually hopeless with no money, filing bankruptcy, into becoming the number one salesperson for a huge international company of 700 salespeople in 5 weeks. That's actually what happened. And there were some things that happened starting here at this telemarketing job that I want to share with you that got me there. Deep lessons, not only about sales, but about life, about how to connect with human beings, that showed me a pathway for how to help people and how to move the needle. I mean, it's a remarkable story. I still can't believe it when I tell it to people. That's why I wanted to do this video, share it with you. Okay, and I really hope that you can listen to this and understand the lesson that I learned in a really hard moment in my life. So I started this job telemarketing. I went into this office, and you might imagine it's a bunch of people looking pretty dreary. It was also the middle of winter. Everyone's kind of huddled in. They got their earphones on, and this computer is just spinning out phone numbers, and everyone just sitting there reading the script, calling people who are also at the lowest of lows. The people that we're calling are in tremendous amount of debt and dealing with facing bankruptcy or whatever creditor situation that they're dealing with, right? So we're on this dialer, and every day at lunchtime, the group would get together and the manager would call out the name and say, how many social security numbers did you get, right? Johnny, how many did you get? Liz, how many did you get? Tracy, how many did you get? Todd, how many did you get, right? And on a good day, you would get maybe 2, maybe 3 social security numbers, whereby the company would then run that information, and then we'd call back with some debt solution, and maybe we would get a sale, and we would get commission on this, right? And to get 2 or 3 social security numbers, we would have to dial hundreds of people. It would be like 300 dials in a day. So at lunchtime, we would check in. All right, well, Todd, you did 120 dials, in the first half of the day. How many social you get? I got one social. Good, okay, good job. We go around the room. So it'd be 1, 0, 0. So I'm doing this job, and you can imagine, guys, I am just down in the dumps, depressed, going home, not sharing anyone that I'm doing this because I just felt so low. I'm meeting with bankruptcy lawyers. I'm doing this job. I'm making no money. And the next day, my second day, I come into work and something hit me, and I realized that the people that I was calling, I was on the phone with this woman, and I realized as I'm looking at her information that I could be calling myself. That while I was judging these people, because there was a judgment of these people who had all this debt. It's like, that's what I was dealing with. And actually, I could theoretically dial a phone number and my cell phone could ring and it could be me, right? And it was just like this huge aha moment where I realized that, man, like I am no better off than these people. And on an ensuing phone call, I just like opened my heart, and I got on the phone with somebody, and I'll never forget, it was this guy, and he was just like really quiet, and I'm calling from this company, and he was probably just really happy to speak to somebody. And I went off script, and I said, hey, what happened? Like, how did you get in all this debt? I was curious. I was genuinely curious how and why he got into this situation. And he told me. And he went into some story about his family, about jobs, whatever it was. We all have our story, right? And I said, look, man, I get it. I'm really sorry. I'm actually doing this job because I'm in a similar situation. And I'm working for this company that, can apparently consolidate debt for certain people. And, I don't know if it can help you, but if you want to give me your social security number, I can run the report and then get back to you and see whether we can actually make life a little bit easier for you. Do you want to do that? And he said, yeah, that'd be great. So I got the social. And then the next call, I did the same thing. And I got that person's social and story. And the next call, I did the same thing. And I started to connect with the human beings who I was talking to. And I developed the capacity to listen. I was listening to them. I was allowing them to tell me their story. And it wasn't because I was trying to get them to do something. It's because I was at such a low moment and I was in the same boat as them that why not? And it was actually really fascinating to hear them. At lunch that day, we went around the circle, and Tracy, you did 120 phone calls. How many socials? 1. John, you did 150 phone calls. Great. How many socials? 0. Todd, looks like you only did 30 phone calls. Like, what happened there? How many socials did you get? 8. Huh? Right? My manager looked at me like, what do you mean? You only did 30 phone calls. Anyway, I shared a little bit. By the end of the day, I had 17 social security numbers, to the point where the president of the company drove in from 2 hours away to meet with me to understand what it is that I did. Because if he could understand what I did and train the other people to do this, his business would explode. And I told him, I go, look, I went off script and I just talked to these people as humans. I wanted to know what happened to them because I was curious. And it came from the heart. It didn't come from trying to get the sale. And he was like, oh, well, I don't know if I can teach that, But I'm like, that's what I actually did. It was a big lesson to learn right there, that the people I was talking to were human and they had their story. And I gave them an open ear and a loving heart, really, to share their story. And then I offered something that, made sense to what they were dealing with. And they all said yes. The next day, the very next day, I'm doing the same thing. And the guy sitting next to me, still a good friend of mine. We're still close. This is so many years ago, but we're still tight. We're friends on Facebook. Mentioned some company that was doing internet advertising that was blowing up. And my ear kind of rang. I was like, oh yeah, that's my background. And I started to do some research on this company. And there was two main companies in this space that were kind of exploding doing local internet advertising. And I came from that background in sales. And so that night I went on the phone, I reached out to these companies. And within 48 hours, I had an offer from one of the companies and a really great connection with the managers. They loved my background. They loved what I was doing. And within the next week, I was flying off to Dallas to get trained from this company. And I was back on track. I had a salary, I had benefits, and it wasn't great, but it was a starting point. And the office had a bunch of young people wearing suits every day, like hitting the pavement, like selling this service. And I felt like, okay, I've found myself, right? Like good bounce back. And again, it's just so important how even the next day I was listening to my environment, and my next door neighbor at the telemarketing job had mentioned this company, right? I was in such an open space to hear and receive information. So I went to the training, and this company was exploding. They had 700 or 800 salespeople all over the country, and maybe 20 or 30 in my office in New York. And I came back in and I got trained. And 3 weeks later, I'm hitting the phones, right? I got my job, I'm hitting the phones, and we had a CRM, Salesforce, that had a lot of leads, already in there, people that had contacted folks. And I'm just using the system to see who had unclaimed leads that might be good for me to call them. And I'm making phone calls, and I noticed this company had all these notes in the entry, and it was like, man, huge advertiser. A lot of people had contacted them. No one had ever set a meeting, so they couldn't claim them, but they were a huge advertiser, right? And there was always funny notes in there. Can't remember exactly, but there were some funny comments. So I call them up. Again, I'm in this space of just really listening. I have a script, but I'm also like in this open space. And I get the guy in the phone right away. And he says, okay, you guys again. You guys call me every week. I said, okay. Well, you seem to pick up every week. Like, what's going on? Do you know about us? Have you given us a shot to hear what I do? He said, no. Look, I tell your colleagues the same thing every week. I am the biggest local advertiser online in New York. I spend $500,000 every month in advertising. I have this entire system. I built it myself. It's unbelievable. You guys would never be able to recreate that. I don't know why you waste your time calling me. I got this thing so down. I said, okay. I said, then why do you take the call? I'm just curious. Like, why are you taking the phone call? He's like, well, you guys call me and I just want to hear what you have to say. I said, yeah, but you've never let anyone come over to your office to actually just share. Have you ever heard what our solution actually is? Have you ever taken the time to just even hear what we do? Because maybe there's something there that could work with you. He said, no, I don't really, have time for that. And I said, I think that you're interested. And I was very light around it. I go, I just think that you're interested. Why don't you let me swing by 4:00 today and let me just show you what we got. You can kick me out of your office in 5 minutes, go for it. But let me just show you what we got so that way you can at least see tangibly what we do. I can be there at 4. Does that work for you? And he's silent, right? I just kind of went for it. The guy's so big, I didn't really care. And he obviously had some interest in us because he kept picking up the phone and talking to us. He said, I can be available at 4:30. I said, great. I'll see you at 4:30. So I go down to the office. I got this appointment, right, with this huge advertiser. It's my first day at this job, basically, making phone calls. I go down to this office. I show up at 4:30. He doesn't come in until about 5:15. Right, comes in, sits down at his desk, and is all over me right off the bat. Like, I don't even know why you're here. This is ridiculous. I have this whole system. I mean, literally, the guy just shows up this way. I say, okay. I go, how much of your time do you spend working on this part of the job? He goes, I have to spend at least half my time, doing all this work. It's a tremendous amount. This is how we get all of our leads and all of our marketing comes from this that I built, and only I really know how to do it. I said, okay. I go, are there other things that you do here? He said, yes, Absolutely. I have all these responsibilities. And I asked him, I said, well, if you were able to get this off your plate, would you be effective and more productive in other areas? And he said, absolutely. There's so much more that I could be doing that I should be doing. So just by asking him questions and hearing him out, even though he was in a stress state, he was kind of angry at me for being there, I found out some information by listening to him, which was, the guy was stressed and what he was lacking was time. He didn't have time. I wasn't going to win him over by getting him better results. There was no way that I could get him better results, right? And I was in this very receptive state with this human being that was stressed around time. And because I was so in my body and feeling my body and listening to him, I knew that the only shot I might have of working with him or offering him a solution that could benefit him would be to offer him what he really needed, was more time. And so I asked him, I said, would it be worth it for you if I showed you what we do? And what if there was the possibility that we could actually relieve some of the time management of the process that you have so you could be free to do some other things? And he said, yeah, that would be interesting to me. I said, it's okay if I run through this presentation. And if you like what I have to say, maybe there's a way that we could trial something out together that would start to alleviate some of the time that you spend on this, so long as there's still some good results, right? And he said, okay, show me what you got. Now, it's really interesting that I did that because I also trial closed him in a sense, right? I kind of wanted to show him our presentation, but I also had said, hey, if there's something here, maybe we can do something and work together. So slowly but surely, I was trying to meet him where he was at by deep listening, kind of giving him what he needed. And I was just really embodying what I had learned at the telemarketing job just a couple of weeks ago, which was, hey, this is a human being who has stress, that has needs. And he's wanting me to be here for some reason, right? Like, it's just not a coincidence. I'm here, I'm in the meeting. Let me make the most of it. Let me go for it while I'm here and just tell him what I see through my own observation. So I went through the presentation and, we made some comments on it. And of course, his comments were like, about how his stuff was better. And it was, because he built it himself and they spent so much money. And at the end of it, I said, I have an idea. Why don't we do a 3-month experiment where you pass us half of your monthly budget? You remain doing what you're doing. You give us half your monthly budget. And we work together to see whether we can start alleviating some of the pressure that you have and the overwhelm that you have in terms of the time you have to spend on this. And I said, look, we're not going to outperform you, but we may end up doing better than you think, and we will work really hard to make this work. We want to be your partner on this. So why don't you give us a shot? And I'll never forget, he just looked at me, just staring at me like this. I didn't say a word. I could care less if he said no. I didn't have any attachment to him saying yes. This deal was so much bigger than anything the company I was working for had ever had that it was almost funny that I was there. And he left the office and he came back in with another guy who was the CFO of the company and said, okay, we're going to do something with these guys. I'm going to go for it with these guys. And I'm like, wow, okay. And he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 month. I'll give you guys $200,000 for 1 month for our budget, and we're going to run it with you guys and see how it does. And I said, look, we won't be able to optimize any of these results in 1 month. You know that. That's setting us up for failure. Give me 3 months. Give me 3 months to optimize. It's worth it. It's not going to be nothing, okay? We're going to work together to see if we can get you to a place where you can free up your time to do something else, right? I'm just going back to what he really needed over and over again through deep listening and observation. And he said, okay. So what ended up happening was we signed these insertion orders and these contracts. I'm literally on my first sales call by myself without my manager. And they processed a check of $200,000 or 1 month worth of advertising. And I came back to the office. Now you have to understand something, that in this company, the average size deal for what we were doing was anywhere from $500 to $1,500 per month. These are small deals. We were dealing with local internet advertisers, dry cleaners, restaurants, right? People that spent a little bit of money I had gone into this whale and bagged it. I wasn't even sure whether my company could handle what was coming their way, but I wanted to go ahead and get the deal, right? And I had found a way to connect with this human, and I felt like we would be able to make it work together so long as my company was going to be open with it. So I come back to the office, and my manager is there, and he's like, it's like now like 7 o'clock at night. He's like, well, how'd it go? I go, well, pretty good. Well, pretty good. I just handed him the check, and he just looks at me like, what is this? Now, I want you to understand something, that in this company of 700, maybe 800 salespeople at the time, the number one rep was in the New York office, and his total book of business was about $200,000 per month of business, probably through who knows how many, maybe 100 different clients that he had. In one fell swoop, I became the number one salesperson in the company by following this simple process of listening and observation. It caused havoc in my company, right? Again, the president of the company in Dallas flew up to New York to figure out how we can make this work, because this was a huge deal. I used this process to ingratiate this client into our work, and they ended up staying on board for 6 months or 9 months. I can't remember now, but they stayed for a long time until it gently went away. But we really did some wonderful work together. But I used this process to become the number one salesperson in the company by a great deal. I was running over $300,000 per month in revenue in the first 2 months I was there. It was absurd. And when I look back on it, I say, wow, 5 weeks before I felt homeless, hopeless, purposeless, jobless, broke. And 5 weeks later, I was the number one salesperson for a company that had 800 salespeople all around the world. I'm sharing this story for those of you that are in sales so you can hear this and broaden your capacity to slow down and to listen. As salespeople, it's so much around the results, so much around can we get these people to do what we want, that we forget that the real juice and the real wisdom lies in our ability to hear. Open your ears, open your heart to the human being that you're dealing with, or the human beings that you're dealing with. They have needs. They have needs in their profession, they have needs in their lives, and if you can find your way to help them, the world opens up.